All right, moving into transcortical sensory aphasia. So you can think of transcortical sensory aphasia as generally looking a lot like vernix aphasia, just as transcortical motor aphasia really highly resembles Broca's aphasia in a lot of ways. The primary difference is that transcortical sensory aphasia, the arcuate fasciculus is spared, so repetition is more preserved than in vernix aphasia. So these individuals are very fluent in their verbal output like those with vernix aphasia, but their speech does tend to be empty, does tend to be void of meaning. They may produce neologisms at time, although probably not as much as people with vernix aphasia. They tend more towards semantic paraphasias, more so than sound level errors, meaning literal paraphasias. They use a lot of non-specific language like stuff and thing that they use to circumlocute their anomia, although there's probably some anosognosia, so they're not really aware that that's an abnormal thing to be doing. So lots of verbal output, probably meaningless, more preserved repetition than what you see in vernix aphasia, but with the usual poor auditory comprehension of language that you're going to see in fluent aphasias like vernix aphasia. So here's an example of a transcortical sensory aphasia.
They're good, boom.
What's this?
The big end right there. End of the football.
End of the football?
It influences the football right here. The cause that it comes in, see?
Yeah.
The end of it, see? Oh, we have all of these, see?
I don't understand.
Well, it's pliable in the ugly, see? You don't understand it, but it applies in the long thread reed comes from there. And it comes source from the country out here, see? All the under it, see, it comes up and finally come out here and goes out, see? Get it?
Sort of.
Yeah, it comes out here, see? It comes out here, and here.
Uh-huh.
And it comes in, and it comes out, and bing. That's a good fly throw, see?
That's a good what?
That's a good flow goes a fly, see, it throws cold or it gives or kicks out or bing or whatever it is. We has no football about it out. It's just pulling, see, but they feel it. Oh, I guess you meant you have beds, see, I don't know.
Where do you live?
Where do you live? You're up here, see.
Where do you live, Doc?
Where do you live?
Where do you live?
Where do you live is, well, if there's a run here around here. You?
So in this video, you see the receptive deficits in that he is not really understanding what the clinician is asking him. You see his semantic paraphasias. He keeps using the word football, end of the football, and we really don't know what that means. But there's also a lot of neologisms in there. And you see the anosognosia when the clinician says, I don't understand. You can see him like his affect is not that, it's not that he then reflects on, I have this severe deficit and my speech doesn't make sense. I need to figure out how to communicate better with this woman. It's more, his affect is like, oh, well, you don't understand. Here, but let me explain it this way. And he just goes more off into the same sort of neologistic semantic paraphasias. So once again, notice in this fluent aphasia, in vernix and transcortical sensory, there's very little functional communication going on between these people, despite her efforts, despite her saying in as simple terms as possible, "I don't understand." And also when she's asking him, "Where do you live? Where do you live?" And he is unable to provide a correct answer. He's unable to realize that he's not providing a correct answer, and he's really unable to understand that he is not processing what she's saying correctly. All right, now, so moving into conduction aphasia, and I like to show this image before I talk about conduction aphasia, because I like to emphasize to you guys that the arcuate fasciculus is like a real thing. This is not like a hypothetical structure that we're talking about. So you can see it here as it runs from vernix and angular gyrus anteriorly to Broca's. It's an actual brain structure. And if you slice that structure with a lesion or stroke or surgical trauma or whatever, then you're not going to be able to transmit the words that you hear or read to Broca's for expression, meaning to repeat what you hear or to say aloud the words that you have read. And when you have a stroke that is more along the arcuate fasciculus than it is hitting vernix or Broca's area, then you're going to get an aphasia that is characterized with more significantly impaired repetition than normal, but less impaired receptive and expressive language than you usually see in people with aphasia. So conduction aphasia, if you were to pick a aphasia to have, this would be an okay one to pick, because their primary deficit is in the realm of repetition, and their receptive language is usually pretty functional, and their expressive language is usually pretty functional. So they understand everything that is said to them, but they can't usually repeat it verbatim. And this is on a level of severity, right? So someone with a severe conduction aphasia might not be able to repeat a 3-word sentence back to you. Someone that's a more mild conduction aphasia, they might be able to repeat a 3-word phrase, 4-word phrase, a 5-word phrase, but maybe when you get to like 6 and 7-word sentences, then their repetition abilities start to break down. Your people with conduction aphasia, they have more phonemic, more literal paraphasias, meaning more sound level errors than your other aphasia types. And they are aware of their deficits, and they're very much aware of their speech errors. So much so that oftentimes they will interrupt themselves to try to correct their speech errors. And in doing so, they come across as being more non-fluent at times than fluent. So your guys with conduction aphasia, they can present with very fluent speech, or if it's just because of that person's personality, they feel compelled to stop and try to correct every sound level error that comes out of their mouth, which it usually takes them a few trials to do, then they can be very non-fluent. Another characteristic of conduction aphasia is circumlocution. What this means is that when they can't find a word, they will try to talk around that word. So if they can come up with a synonym for that word, they'll do that. So they may circumlocute to try to stay fluent, but it often pushes them into using words that are less than optimal, maybe more general words like stuff and thing. But a positive note is that if you're cognitively with it enough to effectively circumlocute a problem you have, meaning effectively compensate for a problem that you have, then you're thinking ahead and you're self-evaluating very well. So those are positive things. The last aphasia I'm going to talk about is anomic aphasia. Anomic aphasia is characterized by pretty much one thing, and that is exactly what you would think of, anomia. But it's a very mild anomia. So, and there's no real specific place, there's no specific area within the left hemisphere that is going to produce anomic aphasia. The left hemisphere as a whole is very involved in language production. So it's really difficult to damage the left hemisphere anywhere and not have a little bit of anomia. So these are those individuals. They don't have a big fat lesion at Broca's or Wernicke's area. They have a small lesion somewhere within the left hemisphere, and it's creating a mild anomia. These individuals, you may not even realize that they are aphasic because they're going to be very good at circumlocuting. So they'll be talking, they can't find a word, and they'll bring up a synonym and keep talking. They're not going to have any paraphasias. They may, when they can't find the word, their specific name for something, they may use a more non-specific term like thing or it or stuff. Their MLU, their average phrase length, is about normal, and their receptive language ability is intact. So really, these are individuals that their primary problem is a persistent and usually pretty mild level of anomia, mild at least in compared to other aphasias. All right, now I'm going to play this video, and it's two individuals talking. Each of them are a member of an aphasia support group or an aphasia therapy group. One is non-fluent aphasia and one has a fluent aphasia. I want you to watch this, tease apart which one is which, and identify the things about each person that leads you to believe which one has non-fluent aphasia and which one has fluent aphasia.
Hi, how are you? Winston Jerome Lindsley, Fairfax, Virginia. And what's that name?
I'm Neil Smith from Novi, Michigan.
Oh, really? Just because?
You went to the University of Michigan aphasia program.
Just because 1, 2, 3. I did.
Yes, yeah. And I was the LEG group, the Language Enrichment Group. I was the coordinator.
Yeah.
That for now.
Yeah.
And Gordon was the speech and language pathologist.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
And,
Sorry.
every Wednesday, I met from 10:30 to 12. I met me and 5 to 10 stroke survivors and or aneurysms, but mostly stroke survivors. And we talked about what we did last week, what we
Hold on, okay?
sorry.
You mean, here? Oh, sorry.
Sunday, June 18th.
Yes, yes,
Yes. You and I
yes.
to Boston, Massachusetts.
Oh, no, Fairfax, Virginia, but
No, we're going from Boston to, and you're gonna go to Fairfax,
yes,
and I'm gonna go to, Detroit Metro.
yes. But like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 is you?
Couple of basic things I'll point out. This guy on the right has his right arm and right leg clearly has some motor deficits. This guy on the left, he is sitting there rocking back and forth, using his hands, pulling out his phone, no motor deficits. This guy on the right clearly displaying more, obviously displaying anomia because he stops, and when he can't find a word, he tries to find it. This guy on the left is more about just talking and 1, 2, 3, right? And moving on. So he's throwing out perseverations and some paraphasias and not realizing that there's not really any communication happening from that. And there's also some degree of, this guy on the left in the black. He's very cheerful, and that's great. Probably some level of anosognosia. He's not understanding some of what the dude on the right is saying, and not really processing that he's not understanding. There early in the video, you had the guy on the right, and he is searching for the word. He's said he uses the phrase language enrichment group, but what he's talking about, we were in an aphasia group, and he's looking for, the term that I was a patient there, but he comes up with coordinator. And so clearly this guy, he wasn't the coordinator of the aphasia group. He wasn't a therapist. He was a patient. He's a guy with aphasia. And yet the dude on the left is like, oh yeah, coordinator, moving on. So not really even stopping to process.